start recording. I'm also broadcasting via WebEx, so if you want to use that link to see the screen that I'm sharing here. I made a couple of changes to my rig yesterday. It wasn't big changes, it was mainly just some organizational stuff, stuff that really probably you're not going to notice, but I wanted to show you some of it. And then I wanted to show you something else that may make the node editor a little bit less confusing for you. And then we're going to add one more small piece to our rig that I think is going to make it usable if you're wanting to see a walk cycle that moves, right? So when we say a walk cycle, that means our character is walking in place as if they're on a treadmill, right? And you can use that in a game because the game engine is what makes the character move around. If you're needing a walk for your short film, though, you want your character to be able to walk across the screen. Right? And sometimes moving all of those pieces across the screen, one piece at a time, it doesn't work as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a master control, or like a main node, that we can animate that across the screen if we wanted to have our character walk forward. So I want to show you a couple of things in the node editor. Or the node view. I know this thing is the bane of your existence for some of you, and like for some of you, you're like, yeah, it's all right, whatever. I think this will actually make it a little more clear. And I also want to mention some stuff about the pegs. If you decided to use pegs for anything, I want to show you sort of a pitfall for that. So, so the first thing I want to show you in the node editor is like, this one is mine, and it is absolutely like a mess, right? Like that is almost not, like you can't really even understand what's happening here, right? And I can move stuff around and kind of organize it a little bit better, but there's some stuff happening in here that just makes it confusing, right? And so I wanted to show you backdrops. I was going to show you this the other day, I couldn't remember the name of it. If we click on this drop-down menu right here at the top of our node view and go to Insert, Backdrop, it creates this red thing, right? You can change the color, but it'll create it around whatever it is we have selected. So I have my left eye selected, right? And it created this little box that like contains it. Right? This is just for organizational purposes. So I can drag this thing out, make it a little bit bigger, right, and put both of my eyes in it, my two eyeballs, right? And then my eyeball peg up here, I can put that in there. And now whenever I grab this, all of that goes with it, right? And so you can kind of use this to organize stuff, right? You can also name this. I can right click on it and say, oh, I'm sorry, no I don't. I click this little yellow box at the top. I can change the color to any color I want, right? Make it that. We can call this eyeball. And now I've organized all of my eye stuff together, right? You can do groups within groups too, right? So like right now I have my right arm, right? Oh, so click that, hold shift, click the other one. Whatever I have selected, if I go up here, insert, backdrop, okay, I've made one for that, right? I can do it again over here for these two. I cannot find the shortcut key for this to save my life. I used to know it. But then the cool thing is I can grab both of these, let's drag all of this, right, and do it again. And now I have those two backdrops and a backdrop, right? I got, this is basically all of my arm information, right? And within here I can organize this more clearly if I want to. Put this over here, fast. That there, these over here, make them a little clearer. Resize it. If you hold down Alt, you can move the backdrop without it affecting the content. And so really this is just a way to kind of organize my stuff, right? So these are my arms, these are my eyeballs. This could be like, I could do this for the rest of the face. And then we have, this is my torso stuff and the kinematic output that goes with that. Backdrop. And then each of these is a different leg. So just being able to organize this stuff makes your life a little easier sometimes. And then this is like unused stuff, right? You can always still keep that connected too. Right now, this is my sketch drawing. I can disconnect that. It stays in my file, but I can always keep that as an extra piece. So the thing I wanted to talk about though, like one is just being able to organize this is really handy, right? And how you organize it, all of that is completely your call. Right? So like right now what I have is, this is my torso, these are my arms, these are my legs, this is my face, and this is my blink. Right? And so for animation purposes, this may make it way easier to just go through here selecting stuff. Right? Okay, so that is one of the things I wanted to show you. The other thing I wanted to show you was just kind of briefly what I have set up here. So I have my torso peg, which is a peg that is hooked to my character's upper body here, and I can move that up and down, right? I have to disconnect those arms. They're not doing what I wanted them to do. So since I can move my character's torso with this peg, that means I don't have to animate on the torso drawing. So one of the things that I do is I spend a few minutes going through here and locking anything that I don't have to or shouldn't set keyframes on, right? So my drawing in this case is being controlled by a peg. I don't want to set anything on the torso. The same with some of this stuff here on the mouth. There we go. So like I don't really need to set keyframes on the mouth drawing or either the eye drawings because I have pegs for that I'm going to animate. The same with the brows. I can animate the brows individually, so maybe I'll go ahead and leave those unchecked. I'm not going to animate the nose drawing individually. So these are just things that I have these deformers on the arms, so I'm not going to animate those individually. And so I'm just locking these so I don't accidentally animate them when I didn't mean to, right? And so by locking them, that means I won't accidentally select them, or even if I do select them, it won't let me put a keyframe on them, right? So I just kind of wanted to show you that. And since that's, I gotta fix something really quick. How is this? I'm just gonna go ahead and okay. So that was just something I tried yesterday. I wasn't too happy with that. So by locking all that stuff, that means I won't accidentally set keyframes on it on the drawing layer when I don't need to, right? The other thing is, did anybody use pegs? Nobody? All right. If you do, actually you're going to here in a minute because I'm going to show you how to make a master control for this, and the peg is the best way to do that. If you do, there is a difference in a peg and a drawing in the way that it automatically creates them. I don't know why it does this though. So if I go and grab like my arm peg and look under my layer properties here, you'll notice that position is set up to 3D path instead of separate. If I selected like the torso, it was set as separate. Now this is actually important because when we go into the function editor, we want it to separate out our translate X, Y, and Z, and we want it to separate out our angle Z, right? And that's what that separate node is for. So I go in here to all of those controls that I might animate, and I go ahead and hit separate on that just to break those out into their own channels. Right, so I'll need one for the face peg. I'll need one for each of my mouth pegs. My brows, my nose. And this is just going to make it a little easier when it comes time to animate or to edit our animation. So the rest of these should be okay. So the last thing I wanted to show you is creating sort of a master peg. So I'm going to go in here and absolutely under nothing, actually, go right here. I'm just going to hit Control P to create one more peg. And I'll go ahead and rename it CHAR peg. And I want to make sure that that's separate as well, right? So I'm going to go ahead and move this over here to like the floor where the character's feet is. This peg will allow us to move the entire character around. Now, one of the ways you can tell if this is working or not is you could actually just parent things underneath this, right? Like if I take my character peg and hook this up to my torso, right there, it shows up in my timeline. And the cool thing about that is now if I move this character peg, that torso peg goes with it. The arms are not right now. So, and the face is, but that's just because the torso is taking it, right? My arms are still disconnected, and you can kind of tell that because if I minimize this, those are the things that are not underneath that, that character peg. So you could grab all of those if you wanted to and drag those under the character peg, and that would work as well, but it's going to screw with your visibility. So you could also just take this character peg and plug it into the arms peg and into each of the leg pegs. I'm saying the word peg so much, it's doing that thing to where it doesn't sound right anymore. So plug that into the leg and the leg. Now the reason I did this is because now that one peg up there is sort of like apparent to everything. In fact, if you look down here, my timeline is completely collapsed and it looks like I just have one thing in here. If I click this little button here, it'll expand it out and you'll get to see what I actually have. But that means my character now, I can move him, I can rotate the whole character, right? And I can also scale the whole character. Use this scale to make the character bigger or do whatever it is I need to with it, right? So if I want to do this animation and make him pretty big so I can see it, I have to hold down Shift to constrain that. Right? And I can do that and move that here. And so now that character is taking up pretty much the entire screen, right? And that's a little easier for me to see. Okay, so that is something I wanted to do, just one, for visibility, two, because when it comes time to export this out into a game engine, I would like to have this like kind of centered and we can export it out into a reasonable size. But this is going to let us work a little bit better here, or a little bit easier here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as a new version. Now I'm ready to animate. Save as new version. 6. Okay. And we're going to talk about walk cycles and run cycles. Actually, I should have opened up a folder for this beforehand. Because it's already up on the network, I'm not going to copy this again over into our folder. But there's some files up here that I want to use as reference that I've used in other classes. So in the DIGM classes folder, under Greg, if you look under old, and then spring 2018, that's the last semester, the character animation class, we have some stuff in here about run cycles, I thought. Yeah, walk lecture, here we go. And so I just have a whole bunch of files in here. I'm not going to give you the entire lecture, but I did want to show you some of the keyframes that we're looking at, okay? So this is a character walk. This is actually a video reference from YouTube. You can, I think it's called, is it Endless Reference? Is that what this is from? I think it is, but if you just look like walk cycle reference or whatever, this is what you're going to find. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there for it. There's also other animation references out there. But luckily, there's another way of getting reference, which is to actually stand up and do it, right? I have bad knees, so there's certain things I can't really do great reference for, but you have a lot of peers in here too. So if you're looking for a specific kind of reference, just ask somebody next to you. Be like, hey, can you help me shoot reference? I need a character to do sort of a bouncy walk or a bouncy run or whatever. Now, what I want to talk about in here in this lecture or in this like discussion about walk cycles is the poses that go into making a walk cycle. Okay. If you've had animation classes with me before, this is probably familiar. This is from Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams. It's one of those books I recommended on day one. And so when we talk about pose-to-pose animation, hopefully you already are kind of getting an understanding of what that means. It means the way we do our animation is to create important moments in an action as a single drawing, right? So let's say a character is going to raise their hand up in the air, right? You have the pose where the arm is down, you draw that. You have the pose where the arm is up, you draw that. And if you just leave it with those two drawings, the arm's just going to pop up in the air. You have to in between that stuff in between it. If you're using a rig, like the keyframe will kind of give you some in-betweens. You can decide how it gets from pose A to pose B with a breakdown, with an extra keyframe. So maybe you lead with the elbow or whatever. But when we say pose to pose, that's what we're saying. We're taking these important poses on our character and we're drawing those, we're creating those, right? And so the hard part with pose-to-pose animation sometimes is figuring out what poses are important. With a walk cycle or a run cycle, that work has already been done for you, right? Like raising an arm, I understand that one. Arm down, arm up, I need both of those for that animation to make sense, right? A run cycle or a walk cycle, pretty much any locomotion cycle, has the same 4 physical attributes that are necessary for that action to work. If you don't have all 4 of these, like, you fall on your face. That's why it takes us a year to learn how to do this. Is all of these 4 poses are important in order to keep you off of the ground and like keep you from tripping, right? And so we can look at these 4 poses. The cool thing about it is, like, since this has been broken down for us, we really just have to get our character's version of these 4 poses. Now, we say a walk cycle, and that means it has to start in a pose and then end in that same pose. That means this is half of a walk cycle. Now, we have our contact pose where the foot is contacting the ground, and we end on our contact pose, but you'll notice that the contact pose we end on is the mirror image of this one, right? In this one, our character's right foot is forward, and that one, our character's left foot is forward. So that means we need all of these poses twice to get a full cycle, right, to end on this pose again. So those four poses, you're going to hear me say them a lot: contact, down, passing, and up. Okay. Some people will use different words for these, but that's what the majority of the world refer to these as, right? So your contact pose is your contact pose because that is the first and last point that your feet are making contact with the ground, right? It's the very first moment that your heel or toe, wherever you're running, moving, makes contact with the ground. And immediately after this, you kick off from behind you with your other foot, right? Your down pose is your down pose because it is the lowest point in your character's hips, right? And if you look at a walk, like your hips are kind of bouncing up and down with each step, this is the lowest point your character ever gets to. It's also the point where your foot is completely flat. Usually your foot will go flat a little earlier than this, like maybe a frame before this. But this is sort of that low point where your character's hips get the lowest. Your foot is flat, your other foot is pushing off from behind you, right? This is also where you've transferred your weight onto that front foot. A lot of people refer to a walk cycle as a perpetual fall forward. And if you think about it, that's what's happening. You're falling forward and then you catch yourself, right? And if you don't catch yourself, then you fall on your face, right? So the contact is where you've thrown your foot out there to catch yourself. The down is where that front foot has absorbed that weight. Right? Now, your passing pose is called your passing pose for a pretty obvious reason. Everything is passing each other, right? Your arms are passing side by side. Your foot is passing your other foot. It's important to notice on all of these poses that our body is doing a twist, right? So in the contact and the down pose and the up pose, right? Like when your character's right foot is forward, the right arm is backward, right? It's behind them. So I'll see a lot of people do their walk cycle and their character does this, right? And that's actually hard to do. Like if you try to walk like that, it's really difficult. The reason your arms are even swinging are to keep you in balance as you take your steps, right? Your leg goes forward, so that means your body has to contort to keep you in balance. And just throwing your arms, the opposite of that, is just sort of the natural way to let that happen. Your up pose is the highest pose in your walk cycle. One of the things I kind of disagree with on the Animator Survival Kit illustration of this is how high the toe comes up off the ground in the passing pose. Because really your toe just barely misses the ground when you're walking. We're very lazy creatures. We don't want to waste calories. And so we just barely keep our feet off the ground high enough to not trip, right? But your up pose is, in this drawing, is a little higher than it usually is. But really the point of the up pose is, if I were standing in my passing pose, I'm in balance, right? I am balanced. I can stand like this for several minutes. Some people could probably do it for hours, right? I could not stand in my up pose more than a fraction of a second. And the reason for that is I would be falling forward. When I say a walk is a perpetual fall forward, the up pose is where you have sort of intentionally tipped yourself off balance, you've thrown yourself forward, and you have to catch yourself or you're going to fall. The up pose is your character kind of going up on their toe a little bit to buy themselves just a little bit more time while they throw their foot forward to catch themselves, right? So you see that the foot feels like it's kind of flipping forward, right? It's a very important part of the pose. So contact down, passing up, and then again, contact down, passing up, we will be back at our start pose. Again, people call it different things: contact, recoil, passing, high point. But you get to see, again, the example of those poses, right? This one's a video again. We can see contact, down, passing. This pause is not working very good. And up. So you can kind of watch it and see it again. Contact down, passing up. Contact down, passing up. So So kind of look for that in the reference. This is true for feminine or masculine walks. In this case, you're doing your walk from the most part for the side view, but it's worth noting the weight shift that is happening in the front view, right? So when she is up on her foot in the passing pose, she has to shift her weight over that leg. So you'll notice a little bit of a weight shift from side to side. I bring this up because there is a stylistic choice you have to make about how, quote unquote, feminine or masculine you want your character to appear, right? That doesn't actually have to do anything with their gender. It could be like, sort of, I won't say traditionally, but like generally it is considered like a strut is very like masculine or you know, whereas like a runway walk is a little bit more feminine. The only real difference in those is the distance apart your feet are. So a more, like if you push the feet closer together, typically that walk is seen as more feminine. If you pull the feet slightly further apart, that's seen as masculine. When your feet are close together, when you're like kind of walking a tightrope, you still have to do that weight shift, but your feet aren't very far apart, so you can't shift your weight very much. So that means the way you adjust is to rock your hips, like to rotate your hips. And so that's why that like bigger hip shift is seen as a more feminine walk. Whereas a strut, you know, like the cowboy, like they're ready to have a duke it out with some guns or whatever. Like their feet are like wider than shoulder length apart, and they shift their weight a lot on each step. So that's something to just acknowledge that you can adjust how most people would perceive your walk with some very small tweaks, right? And that goes for not personality, but like emotion as well, right? Like this walk, just by sort of bending her forward and tucking her elbows in and reducing the amount of arm swing, this is going to feel very like not like emotional or like thoughtful or possibly depressed or tired, just by making this character be more compressed or reserved looking, right? And so like you can make, I think also that curve in the spine is giving that looking forward feel to it. So these are things to consider. Why are you not going to the next? Oh, okay. We can also show stuff about our character's build, and again, feel like he is a heavier, particularly a top-heavy character. He's got bigger shoulders, he has a bigger torso. He's having to shift his weight more. He has the wider foot stance. By curling in and by dragging the feet behind him longer, like look how long it takes him to like kind of push off and pull that foot forward. That's making him feel more sluggish and more tired. These are all at half speed or like quarter speed, so don't take the timing as real. But versus this one, which I thought was pretty neat. Like this one has a very obvious like angry or like directed, right? She's on a mission to get something done, and you get the impression that she's not happy about it, right? Like that she's you know, somebody made a mistake in the office, like somebody said something that made her mad, whatever it is, and we can pick that up just from body language, right? Part of it is the clenched fist, but some of it's in the motion, the way her arms swing back like kind of hard. Her legs are always kind of stiff, like she's like almost like walking almost stiff-legged. And so I think it's important to recognize we can pick those things up just by looking at this, because we watch humans move all the time. Like we're very confident observers of human motion. And so, now the reason I've been sitting here talking about a walk, most of your characters are going to be running. All of those poses, contact, down, passing, and up, they all exist in a run cycle as well. The difference is that the up pose, both feet have to leave the ground. That's why there's a difference in a speed walk and a run, right? A jog is really the first point in an entire walk cycle where both feet come off the ground. If you're walking, if you're speed walking, no matter how fast you go, if at any given point, if there is no point where both feet are off the ground, it's still a walk, right? And that's why there's a difference in a walk and a run. You can't just animate your walk and then play it at twice that speed and make it a run. They're not the same thing. And so I have this image in there for you to kind of refer to. You can find most of this stuff just by Googling walk cycle or run cycle. Again, from Edward, Edward Muybridge. He's kind of famous for, around the turn of the century, taking a lot of photography of people and animals in motion. And this is some of the first time we were able to see this, but you can see in this example, there are multiple frames where both of the character's feet are off the ground. Both of his feet are off the ground. And again, this is public domain. You can find this stuff everywhere. This is a video. Yeah, we don't need sound. That's not part of it. This is actually just slowing you down. So again, you can see contact, down, passing, and up. Right? And so all of these poses, if you're doing a jog, there's a version of a contact, and down, a passing, and up. If your character is walking sideways, it's a contact, and down, a passing, and up. If they're walking backwards, if they're sneaking backwards, there is a version of a contact, a down, a passing, and an up. The problem with animators or the problem with the first time you do a walk cycle, is a lot of animators will do the contact and the passing, and they'll be like, oh, that looks close to a walk, I'm done. It's not accurate then, and it's going to be noticeably lower quality. You need all four of those poses for you to actually see the motion correctly, right? And it's really neat because I will do the contact and hit play, and it just looks like the character's skiing in place. I do the passing, and it's kind of starting to look like a walk cycle. I do the down, and it looks broken. I'm like, there's something wrong with this. But then as soon as I do the up, it's perfect. It all works. It all falls together. So all four of those poses are very important. I don't know what this is. Oh yeah, there's another slow
It's
motion
Naomi Thompson, behind the scenes in The Perfect Runner. We wanted to show the running body in motion in this film. And to do this, we brought in a special camera. We shot these sequences with what's called a voice cam. This is one of the fastest professional cameras you can get. And it shoots as many as 4,000 frames per second. It's the kind of footage you'd see in expensive commercials or big-budget Hollywood films. And we also worked with some really extraordinary athletes with beautiful bodies and fantastic
professional runners
definition.
or people who want to
This is Emmanuel Paris. He's a former sprinter from Canada.
Are taught to land kind of toe first.
This is Christopher Tyler,
but most people walking
400-meter champion.
do still hit heel first. If you hit toe first and you're walking, it starts to feel like a sneak.
She
so
is
this is
one
some
of
slow motion
the
video,
world's
some really
best long jumpers right now. Trains out of Edmonton.
So, okay. Deciding if I want to actually play this one or not. So this one is actually a very interesting animation project that somebody did, where basically he broke down all of the elements in a run in some nude characters. Occasionally they're gratuitously nude, I think, and it's a little, I don't know. All right, we get it. Like, so, just for like awkwardness' sake, I'm not going to play it. I'm going to pass it off to you, and if you want to watch it, I actually encourage you to check it out if you're comfortable watching it. But after I've played it in the middle of class before, and about halfway through, I'm like, I really wish I wouldn't have played this in class. So I'm just not going to do it today. Like, some stuff just swings a little too much, and I'll let you watch that at your own desk. So, there is, however, a tutorial video where he kind of breaks apart how he did that. So again, if you want to look at these, character animation, I'm sorry, Greg Old, Spring 2018, character animation, files, and then it's under walk lecture. Actually, you know what? That's not particularly huge. Let me go ahead and just copy that into our folder so you don't have to try to find that. So I'll just go ahead and copy that into our 2D animation resources. There we go. And that way you can look to those, you can watch those, you can use those as reference as we go along. It doesn't mean that's all of the reference that exists, though. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is very quickly, I'm going to make a run cycle, and then I'm going to export that run cycle as an image sequence and take that into construct, okay? For making my run cycle, all I'm doing is making my key poses for the contact, the down, the passing, and the up, and then, of course, the mirror of those. It's not going to be like super riveting to watch that happen, but you probably will gain something just by watching me do the run cycle. I'm going to do it a little faster just because watching me animate at lecture speed is probably not as exciting. So I would recommend probably what you do is watch me animate, and you can animate along with me if you'd like to, but don't feel like you have to keep up with the speed at which I'm going. Yes? Oh, is it doing that thing again? Hit tab. What's that doing? Okay, try control delete.
Alt tab. It's do that or you can.
Oh, is it alt tab?
It's alt tab.
Okay. Wait.
You alt tab back onto the node screen. It should take you through it.
Alt tab. Try one more time. I have no idea. Sorry, okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start animating on my character. If yours is ready to go, that's cool. If not, there'll be plenty of work time. After I'm done with that, the rest of class today will be work time, and all day on Friday is work time as well. So, all right, let's do this. So, first things first, I saved a version of this with no keyframes on it, just so I can always go back and reanimate it again. I'm going to figure out my length of time. I'm going to do a run cycle. So I'm probably going to limit mine to probably about 12 frames. Let's try that. And right now that's really long. Let's pull all this in. Let's try 12 at first and see if that's fast enough. Okay, so to set a keyframe on everything that needs a keyframe, if I minimize my character peg or my torso peg, or if I just want to grab all of these things, right, and hit F6, it will set a keyframe on everything underneath my character, right? I don't think 12 is actually going to be long enough. Sorry. Let me think about that again. Let's try 18 for right now, just to guess. So again, I just set a keyframe on everything below the character peg. Okay. If I have that expanded out and I just have torso P selected, then it's just going to set it on torso P. But if I minimize it and select it as a parent, it sets a keyframe on everything underneath it. Right. And that's good because we're doing this like as pose-to-pose style. And so that means I'm going to be able to set keyframes on it this way now on everything and make sure that it stays where it is. So starting with character peg, let's see if I turn this on. That's a mess. So I'm just going to use up leg and turn that on. Oh man, doesn't show me all that. I do not want all that. Should have tested this. So all of these things that it's showing here, those are all of those other nodes. You can turn off having them visible. But right now, I'm just going to try to ignore those. And if I'm using IK mode, I can just click on the ones I want and animate that. So I'm going to start with my contact pose. Under the walk lecture, I'll go ahead and pull this up just so you can look at it. Actually, I want to do the run version of it. This one. Yep. And so I'm going to start my contact pose. And I'm going to do contact with my other leg first. So again, Alt. I think I need under my tools property, that's right. Left leg, I go ahead and set that to move. And I'm going to move all of my character up just a little bit. I'm going to move his torso up. And I'm going to move his arm peg up just a little bit. And then each of the legs goes up. So for my contact here, it's showing that front foot hitting the ground, that back foot is kicked back. So let's go ahead and play with that. Just for me too, I usually like to make a temporary ground plane just so I can see where it's hitting. You could do that on a new drawing layer if you'd like. That's what I'm going to do. I'll delete this later. I don't want that. Something else is not here in the regular world, please. There we go. And then with my brush, I'm just going to paint a ground line. So again, still posing. Move it like this. And so you may have noticed that my deformer has disappeared on my character's torso. It's not disappeared, it's just not visible right now. So I need to turn that back on so I can see it. So if I grab my character's torso and I click this button right here, show the selective deformation chain, it'll bring that up. And now I can use that to pose him. I also want to do the same thing with the arms. Actually, I want to show them all. I want to see them all. There. So since my character's right leg is forward, well, it'd be his left leg, I want to go ahead and move my character's left arm forward, or right arm forward. And I'll just go ahead and rotate that like this. Get a little extra swing in it. And even though you can't see it right now, I'd like the other arm to pop out every now and then too. So I'm just going to go ahead and swing it backwards. Right? So a little bit something like this. And I'm going to go ahead and call that we'll call that done for that pose. Okay, so that's my contact pose on my, or my first contact pose here. So I'm just going to go and grab all those layers and hit F6. I also want all of those poses here, so I'll do the same thing here. Hit F6. Now by hitting F6, what I'm doing is I'm making sure that everything in there has a keyframe on it, not just the things I changed. Okay? What? Okay, apparently I messed up on this first pose here, so I do like my last pose, so what I'm going to do is grab those keyframes, right-click, and say, I'm sorry, not right-click, just grab those keyframes, Control-C, and then up here we can paste just the keyframes or just the drawings. I'm going to go ahead and click Paste Keyframe Mode Only. And that way I can paste that same keyframe by hitting Control-V right there. Okay? So that's my key pose. I'm going to go about halfway between here, and I'm going to try to make the mirrored version of this. Okay? So I'm okay with the spine roughly being where it's at, but I want this arm to be on the other end, and probably doing something maybe more like this. Oh, that's all right, otherwise. And I want this arm to be forward this time. And I want it to do a little bit more of a swing, something like that. And then I need to switch my legs. So my right leg, it's going to go to the forward mode. It's going to be more of the contact pose. And my left leg, back to here, and be a little bit more of that like kicking back pose. I'm trying to keep them like one still feeling a little bit like it's in the background by making it a little smaller. That may mean I have to go make changes to the contact pose later. I'm also, just because I kind of was not paying attention to where the foot was hitting on that contact pose, I'm just going to go ahead and bring my ground plane up a little bit. There we go. So now if I hit play, I get this. Look at him, he's running. Or is he? Right? So that's where I'm getting, or this is what I'm getting just with those two contact poses. People who are not animators often want to stop here. Actually, I think that ground pose is a little high. I'm going to lower it a little more. So let's go ahead and start adding the other elements of this, just so we can see it. I think that's more like the contact pose. Okay, so I need to make sure my keyframes are set on everything in here. Right, so I'm going to close all this down, grab all of these layers, and then on this keyframe right here, go ahead and hit F6. And so that makes sure that everything stays there. If you don't do that, when I go to change this pose on my next key pose, it may mess up that pose we just made, right? Because it's going to generate those curves and it's going to try to tween in between those. So even though it looks fine now, if you don't hit F6, it may screw it up later. Okay, so we got our contact. So the order was contact, down, passing, and up. And I think I'm going to go ahead and split my two contacts and get my two passing poses. The reason I usually do that is because usually you can see that I get most of my passing pose here anyway, right? I'm going to divide it up evenly, put it right about here. If you hit F6 now, it just goes ahead and puts a keyframe there, and then you can adjust stuff without having to worry about it too much. So there's my contact foot going from the front to the back. So that one needs to be firmly on the ground. That is my right leg. Nope, it's my left leg. So go ahead and move that one forward. Move it down a little bit. Now, because our character is going to have to sink in the previous pose a little bit, I'm also going to go ahead and lower the torso. Maybe even rotate the torso just a little bit. Get some more dynamic posing in here. Let's just see how this looks. So the passing, maybe what I'll use is this torso peg. I may do a little bit more of a curving forward, maybe something like this. And this other leg, my character's right leg, I can get in here very quickly, pose it. Oh no, I don't want that. So this is the passing pose, so that means this foot is passing from one side, or one point to the other. It's coming forward, so I'm going to go ahead and do something like this, and forward. And again, I may lower the torso even more. Now my arms, if you kind of look back and forth between these two poses, we got contact, passing, right? I feel like my passing needs to be just a little bit more this. And I feel like my character's right arm needs to drag behind just a little bit too. Right, so this one, right, it's coming from forward to back. So that means this needs to kind of be over here and kind of dragging behind just a little bit, and also maybe arcing down, right? So maybe do something like this, drag, a little bit more drag on the arm. Could really stretch it if I wanted to. So again, this isn't the down pose, so I'm not going to exaggerate this too much. This should feel somewhat neutral, I think. It definitely needs to be forward a little bit more, doesn't it? Okay. So, again, I'm going to go ahead and grab everything here. Just hit F6 again, just to make sure it's on there. Now, I kind of want a copy of that over here. I don't know if I want it to be the exact same pose, but I want something, right? And also shift these. I'm going to go ahead and shift it back one keyframe. There we go. So I'm just going to copy this pose and put it over here. Control C. Over here, Control V. Did not work. Control V. Control C. Control V. Okay, there we go. And so that means my feet are in the wrong spot, but the other part is working okay. My right leg, grab it, do kind of the reverse of this. Like that. And then my left foot, I need to go ahead and get a passing pose. Now the other thing that's missing on this is the arms are doing the wrong thing, right? That one arm behind us, we can't really see it, so that's okay. But I'm going to go ahead and fix this arm and make it feel like it's sort of dragging behind a little bit, right? Something a little bit more like this. There we go. Too much. Well, there we go. That's looking a little bit more like a run. Now, what I am going to do is, even though it's getting closer, like I still want to add that down and that up pose, okay? So the down pose is pretty important because it's the low point, right? And I don't necessarily know about my timeline here. Let's figure out if I need more frames or not. I think I might. Let's go ahead and just extend this out to 20, and then I'm going to retime some stuff. 5. Go ahead and drag these out to that. Yeah, this will work better. And then I can put this one frame later. Put this 1 frame later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So really, I'm going to do this at 19, maybe. I'll do it at 19. It's an 18 pose, 18 frame pose. Let's try that. We'll do 19, and then we'll export out 1 through 18. See if that feels better. Does that feel too slow? We're going to try it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut some of these distances in half. So from my contact to my down, I'm going to try that in 2 frames. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this, like cutting it in half, I start with my contact, I made my other contact, and then I went in here and made the passing pose, which is halfway between that, right? I did my contact and then my passing. One of the reasons I did that is because I got some information for free when I did that, right? Well, now, as I've started to subdivide this, I'm going to get even more information for free when I do this one, right? So this is my down pose, and the foot is almost in the right spot. So I could grab my torso, my up leg, that. I think I can just move all of those Should probably do all, I'm gonna do it that way. Let's just do that. If I move all of these together, never mind. Torso. So I want this to be at the lowest spot, right? My right leg actually looks pretty close. My left leg, I wanted to make it on the ground too, but it's going to be bent. So my knee is going to be bent back like this. This. This may be a little much. Let's see. That's not bad. I'm going to go ahead and move that leg up just a little bit more. And go ahead and do the foot. This. There we go. And so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to exaggerate my characters, like where right here he's kind of dragging back. I want it to look like his lower body went forward first and his head kind of dragged back on this pose. So I'm going to go ahead and move his torso down where it's at. Go ahead and rotate it a little bit more. But I want to drag his head way back, right? Something like this. So the reason I'm doing that is because now it's going to look like his head's dragging and then kind of squashes there, right? So it kind of does that. Now his arms need a little bit of push as well. So I will go ahead and grab that right arm. Something you'll notice in some of the in the run animations is the down. The arms are pretty close to the same as the contact, maybe even push them a little bit more. So I'm going to exaggerate the arms and have them like almost swinging through more. Maybe something like that. Same thing here. Make him look like he's really like almost struggling with this. And so now when I hit play, like I said, it's going to start to feel broken a little bit, but you got to trust the process on it. So minimize all this, make sure I have keyframes on everything, F6. I can always go back and fix this later if I want to. So I'm going to copy all these keyframes again. The reason I'm doing this every time is because if I copy these, I get the spine information and I get sort of some reference of where the other elements are as well. So paste that. So the spine is now okay. I just have to change the legs and the arms. Let's go and do the arms really quickly while we're already on them. Let's do the arms, something like this. The other arm. Bring it here and do like a big swing through. There we go. But I gotta get the feet fixed. So right leg. Left leg. And just to make sure, keyframe everything. So this is what I should get now. So again, it feels like I broke it. I didn't. It's just missing the follow through from that down, right? It's missing the complement to it, which is the up. Right? We're needing the up pose. So that means we break that one up pose down, and I think we're going to be really close. Let's see. Are y'all still seeing video on your screen? I just got an error that said it's having technical issues.
Yeah, but it's slow.
So it's probably,
It's like
yeah. I thought it might be. I think that's just where it's on the internet. It's just a bandwidth issue. Okay, so we're going to put the up pose somewhere in here. Again, the up pose, I want to do like 4 frames after my. I'm going to do it pretty quick after. I want to do 2 frames. So again, the up pose is the highest pose on the entire animation. If we want to see what we have so far, we can use onion skinning still yet, right? We can see what our entire animation is looking like so far. And so you could use this if you wanted to take your character higher than it is in any other pose. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way, but let's try it. Let's take our torso, move it up super high, make it a pretty big jump. Go ahead and rotate that as well. I'm going to use these move tools to kind of drag the head back, right? Maybe something like this. I haven't done anything to the eyes. I may play with those as like another pass here in just a minute. Right now, he's just looking wherever I move his head. So that can be a little bit of a annoyance. I'm going to go ahead and move the arms up in this one a little bit as well. And then just to kind of see where the legs are going, I need to, bless you. So if you look at the passing pose here, they're showing it, I'm sorry, the up pose here, they're showing it as the foot still contacting the ground. I always like it the one where the feet are all the way up in the air, but you can kind of mess around with that however you want to. I'm going to try this though, move the right leg. Oh, wrong thing. Move it, not change the pivot point. So again, the passing pose is the character sort of flipping their leg out there so they can catch themselves. So maybe a little bit of something like this and this. And then the other leg, a little bit more of the push off before or after the character has kicked off the ground. So maybe a little more like that. Keep in mind, I can scale stuff too, so I can always stretch this if I wanted to. And I can make it thinner if I want to, so I'm going to try that. And I'm going to go ahead and push it back just a little bit more to something like this. I'm going to grab everything on my timeline here. So you see where, if you look at my timeline, you see how that one keyframe is white? That means not everything is keyed on there. And so I need to make sure that it is. So I grab everything, hit F6, this sets a keyframe on everything. This button right here will also set a keyframe on everything. And so now, I'm going to turn off my onion skinning. Now half of it's feeling a little bit better, right? So I still need the up on the other side. Let's see what happens when I do that. Copy all of those, Control C, Control V. So again, got to switch out the arms. In fact, what I may do, I may go ahead and delete that keyframe on the arms there. That was a bad idea. Oh, maybe it wasn't. So delete keyframes, and then I can just kind of manually put them where I need them to be. this. So it goes from there to there. I want to move that forward more. Maybe even drag it back more. I feel like he's sort of twisting that arm forward. And of course my legs are all broken, so I'm going to have to fix those entirely. Twist. So I did that scale thing, where I used this to kind of scale the overall length of the leg here. So I could do that on this side too, if I wanted to. Problem that is over here where I use that scale, it's still stretched. We can look at the values we've changed. If I just click here on this plus sign, we can see the things we've done. And really you'll see here I've got scale X is at 0.9, scale Y is 1.2. I can just change those back to 1 and 1, and our leg will be back to its normal length and width. Right? And that means I can go here and kind of bounce back and forth between this keyframe and this one just to see what I have that knee looking like. That. Oh yeah, I shouldn't like what I've done with the arm. There we go. Goes up and down. Move this. I like that better. Again, grab it all, F6. See what that looks like now. There we go. So now it's feeling a little bit more like a run, right? Now, these are just my my key poses. I still would go in there and polish a few things. So like one of the things I'm noticing is like the foot is maybe not staying on the ground straight enough as it's running through there. And so I may like make sure in some of those in-between poses I can fix that. I'll probably also go in there to my function editor and change some of the way that deformation is happening on the spine. Doesn't really bother me on the rest of it. So I'll probably just work a little bit on the torso here. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and save this as a different file. Save as a new version. We'll call this character in class run. Okay. So some of the things I want to change, I think I want that foot to stay on the ground just a little longer before it kicks off right there. Right? So I would just go in here to my character's left leg and just kind of manually tweak that pose a little bit. Something more like that. And get that foot just a little straighter. Something like that. There we go. Yeah, I like how that's looking good. I also kind of would like it to contact a little more right there. Right? So maybe something like that. And this. There we go. So I need to do that on the other side too. So where the foot contacts right there. On the right. That. And then as it's kicking off right here, carry that on through a little bit more, keep on the ground a little longer. There we go. Something I kind of notice is this point right here on the top. Like that's where a lot of that overlapping action is happening. And I kind of want it to feel softer. I want that like rotation right there to feel softer. And I kind of want the character's up and down motion on the hips to feel like a little softer too. Not softer, but a little more like less twitchy. Right, so I'm going to do a little bit of work in the function editor. So again, there's my function editor. If yours isn't showing up, you got to just hit the add button, add function editor. So in my timeline, I need the character's torso peg, right? And then under the function editor, this is what I'm getting. Now, interestingly, you'll start to see patterns in these, right? So I don't really need my position Z, but you'll see in my position X, right? Like you're going to see these patterns. X is, I believe, going to be our character's forward and back motion. Test that by adjusting the height of that. Yep. And so I may not need quite so much of it. Like maybe we could test what happens if I just grab that key and that key and raise that up to here. That might make my animation a little smoother. Again, I don't have to be perfect on this. I'm just trying that. And so what's that look like? Yeah, I don't see a negative impact on that, so let's go ahead and keep it. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of smoothing on these. I'm just going to grab everything. Under corner, I'm going to change that to smooth. And under this, I'm just going to choose some ease in and out with this sort of S shape. Now it's going to mess up these curves, but then I can just manually adjust that. Right. Hopefully. I guess really, if I wanted to, I could just delete that. Nah, I don't feel happy about that. There we go. All right. So that was my position X. That's the forward and back. Right. My position Y is the up and down. You can kind of see what's happening there is feeling a little weird. So I'm going to, again, smooth, choose this, and then manually fix the ones that are not doing what I want them to do. And I want this to kind of come in sharp here and come in sharp here because that's going to loop. As it goes down to here, it's going to come straight into here and continue that. So I'm going to do a little bit like that. Let's see what that does. Yeah, that's feeling a lot better. However, I am noticing now that I made that change, he comes up a little too high for his legs there, so I'm going to have to change that pose on them in just a minute here. Actually, he's coming up a little high on his legs everywhere. So maybe all of these higher poses just need to be adjusted just a touch. And it's actually right through there. I can fix that. Yeah, it's feeling better. And then the last thing I want to check is the angle Z. Yeah, so you can see that it's kind of lumpy as well. Again, smooth curves on that. Like that. Yeah, it's feeling a little bit better. Now, that little pop that's happening in the deformer is we haven't really looked at this yet, but if I go to my torso, I got this deformation torso, and when I click on that, you'll see that the plus sign here on that deformation torso, I have bone and bone 1. So those are the two things. Bone is this first line, bone 1 is this line here, right? And so I believe it's in bone 1 because I tried to not rotate that first bone too much, but just to test it out, we'll grab that, go to our function editor, and we got our positive x, negative x. We're going to frame that up. Yeah, so there's not very much moving in that first one. So I think it's going to be on bone 1 function, positive x, negative y. Frame that. What is happening? Orientation. Oh, it's in the orientation of it. I'm sorry, not the... Okay. So for this, I just need to smooth that out just a little bit. Right? Again, set that to smooth. Get those together. No. I actually may delete that key. Nah. Okay, and let's see if that other one actually had anything in the orientation. Nope. Okay, so let's see if that looks better. Oh yeah, that looks way better. Now, what I would like to do though is, you'll notice when my character's head hits, it's right at that point, right there, right at my passing pose, and then it goes to there. I would almost like my passing and my up pose on that bone 1 to be just a little later. So I'm just going to grab those keyframes and maybe drag that a frame down. I may do it with this one too. Let's see what that does. Just to get us a little bit more overlapping action. That made it worse. Let's try it the other way. If I can do that. And instead, what happens if I move him a frame earlier? There we go. It's feeling a little bit better. It's a little bit headbangy right now, but let's see what we get. A little bit of orientation on that one. I think I can tweak that just a little bit. Make that just a little higher so it lines up better. Yeah, I like that. So the last few things I'm going to tweak is where I've messed up the legs a little bit now. They come out of the body right about there. It's right through there. So I can just go in there and put in some extra keyframes on the legs. So the right leg up. Just going to nudge it up just a little bit so it doesn't come out of the body quite so much. Same with the left leg right there. And I think it happens again right here as it's coming down. It's actually a little worse on this one. So we'll do something like that. Something pretty bad there too, isn't it? that up and stretch it more. Stay like that. Yeah, I think that's working better now. Okay. So, last little thing I'm going to do, I made a peg for my character's eyes so I can adjust where they're at. And that's going to be under my torso and then under all of this stuff here, all my face peg, eye peg stuff. So this right eye peg, left eye peg, that's for the blinks, I think. No, I'm wrong. It's the eyeball peg. It's this one right here, my eyeball peg. And so it has keyframes on it too. I'm just going to go in here and on the animations where it looks like he's looking away, I'm going to kind of fix those. Right? I want it to look like he's looking forward as he's running. And I can copy that one. So we got there. I don't like that one. I can also rotate this, if that'll help. Nope. Okay. So now it doesn't quite feel like they're flopping around in his head quite as much. Again, I could do like a little bit of stuff on his eyebrows if I wanted to. But right now I'm okay with this. So, let's let it play just for a few seconds there while we're looking at it. All right. Now, that took, animation-wise, what, like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that at the most. And that was me kind of talking through it. The cool thing about this is like you can crank out animations all day like this. Like once you have the rig, it's a lot quicker to be able to just pose your character to do what you need out of it. There's still probably a little tweaking I could do on this, but I'm not unhappy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and save it here. And then very quickly, I'm going to show you how to implement this into Construct. Before I do that, I do need to check and see which version of Construct is on here. We've currently been using Construct 2 just because it's a little more like, we've just been teaching the class with Construct 2 for a while. Construct 3 is available now too, and it's a full game engine. Like I think it's like $99 a year or something like that. But you can publish to the iPad store, you can publish to Android Marketplace and make money on it with that. So basically, this and a jump animation, you can make an infinite runner in there in probably just a couple hours. You're gonna make something a little more elaborate. It's got some more stuff that you can do in it. You can make something from scratch. But this will allow us to get our character running in the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and it's just switching gears just for a few minutes. Don't feel like you have to understand how Construct works, but if you want to, that could be something we can implement outside of class or as sort of part of the workday. Save as new version, call this run 2, okay.
So we're not going to be doing coding or anything?
Doing what?
Coding stuff in Construct?
We can, but not as part of the assignment. Like I can help you get yours into the game if you want to do that, but like I don't want to require you to do that for part of a grade. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see what's on here in terms of construct. Yeah, construct 2. I'm sure it's going to tell us that this is an old version and we need to update to the new version. So let's see. No, don't check for updates. Okay. Go away. So one of the cool things about this is there are some presets in here. So I can hit new project and it gives you some options for some templates, right? I'm going to do a new template. Let's do auto runner. Okay, so I hit open and this is what it's going to get us. So very basic overview of construct. This is all of the elements in your scene. You can select them. That's our character. You can see that we have our character over here, our player character right there. We also have it over here. And so up here at the very top, we have this little play button. So again, if you wanted to open this up too, just type in construct. It's construct 2. There's some stuff going on in here in terms of programming, but why we introduce people through construct is because you don't have to know how to code anything. You just have to be able to create these like execution, they're called event sheets, right? So right now this thing is already sort of set up to be an infinite runner game, and your character can just run forever in this. This shows you how that works. The first time you try to make something in it, it's a little confusing about what's happening. After you've made your second or third one in it, it all makes sense and you just have to like think of what executable elements you need on there, right? So we're not going to worry too much about the event sheet right now. We're just going to look at the layout. And this game is ready to play. If I hit this play button, it's going to run the layout. And so this is our infinite runner, this little guy. Any button I hit will make him jump. And if he falls in the hole, it just restarts. Right? So what we're going to do just for this example is I'm going to replace this little guy with the character I just animated. Okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and kill this. The way I do that is I just select the player here or here or here and double click on him. And it's going to bring up my animation editor. Right? So I can zoom in on this a little bit if you want to. You can see that's the character. There's one animation frame. And so he's not doing anything. If we wanted to do this as like a sprite game, I could duplicate this. I could erase his legs. And let's do it on both of them. Erase his legs. I'm going to draw him some little stick legs in yellow. There we go. We got one leg, 2 legs. Yeah, I'm an animator. I can choose that default animation, double click on it. Where's that at? Open that up. Oh, yeah, where I have it selected over here, it's over here. I'm going to make it loop. We'll go ahead and say yes. And if I close this down now, you'll see that whenever I play it, now his little legs are running. Yay! Right. So basically, all this is just a place where we can import images. And so we already know how to export images, right? We just export them out whatever size we want to, right? So let's go ahead and export out our images of our little guy running. I'm going to go ahead and delete my ground plane, so I don't need that. File, export, render write nodes. Again, I'm probably going to want PNGs for this. I need to delete that whole layer, don't I? So I'm going to select my write node over here in the node editor. Right there. Under layer properties, I'll go ahead and change that to PNG4. The reason I'm doing that is so it'll have the alpha channel on there. And then again, go File, Export, Render Write Nodes. I'm going to render frames 1 through 18. The reason for that is because 1 and 19 are the same exact frame, and I don't want it to hitch when it hits that point. So go ahead and hit 1 through 18. Hit OK. And what I should have now in that folder is character, frames. I just have all the frames of my character running. So that's all I need. If I go back to construct and I double click on this player, I'm going to delete my animation frame. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I'm going to right click and say import frames from files. And then I just need to go find that folder. Dragging class. Link to character, frames. I'm just going to select them all. I'll select them in order, 1 through hold, and then hold Shift, 18, hit open, and it just loaded in all of my frames. I'll go ahead and delete that original guy now. And so now when I click on this, I should be able to see him in here. Where is he at? He is enormous. Look how huge he is. Compared to that other guy, that means if I hit play right now, he looks like this, right? That's not...
That's fine.
That's, yeah, perfect. Everything's fine, right? So let's go ahead and go back in here to the player. First thing I want to do is sort of resize the character a little bit. I want to resize his like bounding box, because right now the character size is the size of this whole thing. And I want to make him a little bit smaller on our screen. So I'm going to go ahead and hit crop, and it's going to crop to that shape. And so now, if I want to see this animation, right click and hit preview, and you can see the animation. Right? Now that's the speed it wants to play in construct. To change that, I need to change it by clicking default, and then over here in speed, I'm going to go ahead and set this to 24. Right? And so now if I play it or preview it, that still feels a little slow. All right. Yeah, we can. Let's see how he looks in game. It may be playing slow because it's so big. So the other thing, like he's still this size, right? I could actually go in here and grab the player in the game and resize him. But the easier way to do this is, because I don't want to waste memory on my character, is to resize the entire animation, right? When I cropped that, it went to all the frames, right? No, it didn't. Let's undo that. So I'm going to go crop. I'm going to crop all of them. I really have to do that to everything? Hold Shift to crop entire animation. Go. There we go. To make sure that didn't mess it up, if I hit preview, yeah, it's still working. So now that looks like the right speed. I think what it was is all of that extra space was slowing it down.
Looks like it's a little
It looks like it, but I don't think it is. I think it's like going right to the edge there. We can like right to the edge. So let's try this though. The next thing I want to do, because he's still this size in here, right, is I want to resize all of the objects too. So this resize button. So right now his character size is 470 by 875. To give you an example of this, he is the original character that was in there was, I think, 16 by 16, right? Like it's really small. I'm going to just go ahead and figure out like what the right size for this should be. I don't remember if these are connected or not. Let's see. Let's do, if I did 200, they are not. Ah, that's annoying. Okay, so that means we got to do math. I apologize. Calculator. HD. No, I just want a regular. Really? There's no calculator on here?
You could also just switch it to inches and
No, this is like stretch. Like, yeah. Let's just do some math here, because really, I want it to be maybe like. Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do 47 by 87. Let's try that. So that makes him way smaller. I also don't know if I did that. I didn't do it to the whole animation. Ah. Let's try it one more time. That's not undo at all. Okay. That's what this does. Now, this may mess it up a little bit, though, the way it did it. Ah, it works. Ah, it didn't. It's kind of stretching him, isn't it? Okay. Okay, give me 1 second to fix this. I'm just going to have to delete all of these. So we're going to import frames from files. All of them. Delete that first one. We're going to hold Shift to crop the entire animation. Before we do that, let's just resize all of these frames. So instead of 1920 by 1080, let's do let's try 192 by 108, and then I'm going to apply that to the whole animation. And we'll just go ahead and, sure. Okay. There we go. And so now I can crop all of them, holding Shift, click that, cropped all of them. So now I should be able to hit preview. Yeah, that worked better. Okay. So now I have this, and if I hit play, well, that happens. That's hilarious. I think I know what's happening actually. So let me just kind of show you this again. There's one of two things that are happening. It's either his event sheet right here. You don't want him to slowly slide off, and so they are adding 5 units if he gets further than a certain distance back. But I also think that part of what's happening is my character has a collision box. Like it's the thing that it runs into stuff with. And we can see that if we click here, select collision polygon. I think, let's do guess polygon shape. So that's not what I want. Let's just go ahead and reset it. So it could be that. Let's just say set to bounding box. And it could also be this, like this origin point. I think it's this bounding box thing though. So let's right click. Let's just make it a little bit smaller. Maybe something like this. And hold. Right click. Apply to, no. Let's go and leave it in bounding box. I think it's something else actually. So I think it might be our origin. Is it? Yeah. So that's the problem. You see this little point right here? It's moving around. And that little point is like where the, how the animation figures out where the center is. So this is kind of annoying, but what I'm going to do is right click on that. It's this button right here. I can click on that and say quick assign. I'm going to put it at the bottom. So it's going to put it in the bottom middle. I'm going to right click and say apply to whole animation. And so now I think that that's in the right spot. And if I hit play, yeah, there we go. Interesting. So it's not actually looking exactly right. I think part of that is because he's up in the air in some of these. So I'd probably keep working on this. I think we could work on this a little bit more to put his like center point a little bit in a different spot. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and there's another way. There's a couple of extra things we could do to make it feel a little bit better on here, but I kind of just wanted to get us an example of them. So the problem with it right now, the reason it's not looking right to me, is because, well, one, he like flickers out of existence every now and then. But remember how we had him sort of popping up in the air in game? When we brought him in here, it kind of trimmed some of that out. And I think that's where I'm doing that auto trim thing. I think I would want to export it out in a slightly different way to make it work. But either way, we have our image sequence in there. It's working. He is slowly sliding back still yet. So I think that's where I moved that one pivot point. But hopefully that makes sense. So. Again, all you really have to turn in those in the movie. Yeah, see how that kind of pops up in the air here? I think that we're kind of missing some of that when we get that auto trim in there. So I can keep tweaking with it, and sort of if this is something you're interested in doing, I can show you how to do this. So, bottom. Yeah, that's the problem, because if we like preview. Yeah, when did it do that? That's not right. Anyway. I think the way we would change this is for each frame, we would have to put it in a slightly different spot. Or we would just export it with more space along the top and the bottom a little differently. So, all right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. That's covering a lot. If you're interested in the construct part of it, let me know and I can help you get that working on yours. So, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the video and I'll upload that to YouTube.